Pretty good? Good? All right. Well, I see Terry Wood's name, but I don't see Terry Wood's lovely face. So let me just boot up my PowerPoint here. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Certainly seems that spring has arrived. Feels good. All right, what's going on here now? Where is my PowerPoint? All right, there we go. All righty, so this is part 2 of intuition. And yeah, this is a lot of fun. This is a lot of fun to put together. And I think like we talked about last week, you know, we won't really, this is a big topic, right? So probably, we certainly won't do it justice in a, in 15 or 20 minutes in, 3 sessions, because I think we'll wrap it up next week. But it's fun to get into, and we can, keep talking more about it, and just, give us a kind of a basic understanding around, how our intuition works. And so just to cover from what we started last week. So what does it mean to have an intuition or to be intuitive? It's the ability to understand or know something without needing to think about it or use reason to discover it. I think that's a really good explanation. It's how we receive information, but without reasoning for it. Okay, which requires listening. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And these first few slides are just kind of recap from last week. And it's the information that comes to you kind of right before our wishful thinking and our brain kicks in, right? So we all have, like, we'd like it to be this way, even though it might not be, whatever the thing is, or circumstances, or whatever a potential outcome could be. And then we also reason. We think things through because, frankly, we've been taught to think things through or reason things through before we listen for the information. Okay, and I don't mean listen in an auditory sense. I mean, it's about letting your intuition, your inner voice, okay, speak to you. And really, that's how, in most cases, your intuition will come to you. It'll either come as an inner voice, and or, okay, it will also come maybe physically. You get a little bit of a sensation. Your stomach maybe feels a little, queasy, or maybe you're getting excited, whatever the case may be. But it's the information that comes to us before our wish lists and before we start reasoning things. And of course, in the West, we've always been told, well, think it through, right? As opposed to allowing information to guide you, the natural information you get. And so, who has it? All of us, right? We talked about that last week. We all have the ability to intuit things. It's simply a matter of how you develop it. It's really no different than going to the gym or doing yoga or any other type of discipline. You're learning a foreign language, all those types of disciplines. This is a muscle, maybe not in a physical sense, but certainly in a sense that helps you, that the more you use things, the more you work with it, then the better you're going to get at it. And so if you only work with it randomly, then you will only get random results. If you work with it all the time, then you will get all the time results. So it's kind of no different than, one day you say, well, I'm gonna go out and I want to run 3 miles. Well, on any random day, if you don't do it on a regular basis, maybe you're okay. But most days you're probably not going to be. All right. So how can I distinguish intuition from my general thought patterns? Okay. So my general thought patterns. And basically they're feeling based, they're not rationalized. And so think about it in terms that the information comes to you, you're not going out to get it. And that's only works, like we had just talked about, if we're listening. And listening is really critical. It's one of the reasons why practices like yoga or any type of meditation practices, or just being in silence, walking in the woods, walking in nature. It's one of the reasons why those practices are so powerful is because the information while we're in them, our mind tends to be more quiet. And then once we've quieted the mind, that's what creates the space for information to come to us, okay, like our intuition. And it's a matter of, are we willing to be open to the listening? And the listening, again, like I had just mentioned a couple slides ago, the listening is that inner voice, okay, not the inner critic. You have to discern between the inner critic, but that inner voice that says, "Hey, you ever thought about this?" And because that we didn't reason it, because we didn't work it out on a piece of paper, or somebody else didn't tell us, whatever the case may be, we tend to discount that information as we get it. All right, because we physically didn't come up with it ourselves. Like, how could I possibly get information, from someplace that is something that I didn't figure out? Okay, and we're going to talk about the whys and how that happens in the next couple slides. But so think about it in terms of the information that comes to you, and it's that inner voice. Now, so now we're going to start getting into some science. And before we get into this, though, I want to preface this by saying, a lot of what technology and science does, not all of it, of course, but what a lot of it tries to do, it tries to figure out what happens in nature. So a lot of science is about trying to figure out, well, what happens naturally, like take DNA or gravity, these types of things, right? Is that a lot of times science is really trying to sort out, trying to figure out, well, how that happened, right? Nuclear power is basically just the chain reaction from the sun, right? And so how do we decode that and make that here? And now science is beginning to get some information and on studies and some results on how the subconscious mind works. And so I've got, these are all kind of from Wikipedia. One of these I think was University of South Carolina, but I'll give you just kind of a snapshot, all right, of how your intuition works and kind of where it comes from. So according to cognitive neuroscientists, this is a pretty common usage of these percentages. About 5% of we use our conscious mind about 5% of the times, and that kind of makes sense. But 95% of all of our actions and behaviors come from our subconscious. 95% of everything we do is already programmed into us. Now that's one of the reasons why change is so hard for people. Okay, like real change. It's because if 95% of our habits, okay, are generated from our subconscious, that means that we're kind of doing them automatically. We're on autopilot. And so you have to not only change the way you think, but you have to change the way you feel as well. So you have to put the thinking and the feeling together, all right, to get real change at a subconscious level. And you have to be able to do it long enough, all right? It has to be 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks of rigor for you to be able to kind of rewire your subconscious. So, when they talk about, only 5% of what we're doing is conscious, like right now, I'm using probably my 5%. Like I'm consciously talking about this. So some of this I have as imputed information, of course, of just my knowledge base. But generally, right now I'm being very conscious and I'm using my 5%. What's more interesting though is how fast your subconscious can absorb information. Now I gave you 2 statistics down here about how fast. Now, they're still sorting this out, so I wouldn't look at any of these as being concrete, but I would look at them as a sampling, okay, of how your subconsciousness impacts how you can intuit, because it's taking in information that you consciously are not aware of, right? I just want to repeat that. So your subconscious is taking in vast quantities of information, all right, that your consciousness your conscious awakening moments are not aware of. So they're saying that in one survey, they're saying that, or study, they're saying that 20 million bits of information per second is how much the subconscious can process. 20 million bits. Okay, that's a lot. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I think it gives you an understanding though of maybe the scope. But yet your conscious mind can only absorb about 40 bits per second. And if you think about it, that kind of makes sense, right? I remember I was working over the weekend, and my phone was going off, and my appointment calendar, my Outlook calendar was going off on my computer, and I had a TV going on in the background, and I'm like, oh, this is like way too much stuff, right? So we have a capacity in our conscious thinking that we can only really handle kind of so much, but they're also talking about how fast in this second study, how fast information hits your subconscious. They're saying 100,000 miles an hour. Is that accurate? I don't know. I mean, maybe, but whatever it is, though, it's happening at such a fast rate, okay, that our conscious mind's completely skipping it, and our subconscious mind's absorbing it. And if you like spycraft, right? Is they teach people how to take their subconscious and move it into their consciousness so they can scan a room, okay, to find exits, to see who's a threat, what's an anomaly in the room, right? That someone is looks out of place, or something looks out of place, right? So there are ways in which you can work with your subconscious, but the point of all this is to kind of two things. One, that science is really trying to sort out what we kind of do naturally, and to point out that your subconscious is constantly looking for information. It is constantly taking it in and putting it in the recesses of your mind. Now, this also includes non-local information. All right, and non-locality, and these are the things that the early physicists, Bohm and Einstein, they all fooled around with this stuff. And non-locality is, in everyday life, like distance and location are absolutes. Like we have to, like I went from Keene to Bedford today. But physics, especially quantum physics now, really suggests that at a fundamental level, most things are non-local, like time and distance and place doesn't necessarily really exist, and that everything is kind of happening all at once. So, we just went from this past slide talking about some scientific studies about how the subconscious mind works and how it takes in information that our conscious mind's not aware of, to now we're talking about something maybe a little more esoteric about non-local information. And basically, non-local information would be, or a non-local event, for instance, and we've all experienced this, so this is like really super, super easy to use, okay? So non-local information would be, or connectivity would be something like this. Terry and I are having a conversation, and I know what she's going to say next. Who's had that happen? No hands? Doesn't have to be with Terry. It could be with anybody, right? So I'm thinking of my friend Bob, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, who's on the phone? Bob, right? And or like when you're with like I was with my grandson a lot this weekend, and there was something kind of bugging him. I knew something was bugging him, but he was smiling and laughing and all that. But I could just kind of tell, So all I had to do was kind of ask him, right? Hey, what's going on? He's like, oh, well, we explained this thing. He's 10, so and that's kind of non-local information. And so your body, how we're all structured is that we're kind of like this big sender and receiver. And our subconscious mind, right, which picks up all sorts of information. It picks up kind of like local information, like what we see, but it doesn't necessarily register in our conscious mind. It picks up things energetically that were, in a non-local sense, like information we're getting on a non-local sense. Like I'm thinking about this person or this thing, or and it kind of stitches it all together. Okay. And then that's what kind of folds in together to become kind of your intuition. So your mind's taking in at a subconscious level vast amounts of data, and what's getting scooped up in that vast amount of data is also kind of non-local information energetically. Because if you really study quantum mechanics, so this is just quantum mechanics, is that information can exist in more than one place at a time, and that when they do quantum entanglement, which is you've got two particles that are connected, and if you separate them, if you do one to the other, if you do one to one, it does the exact same thing to the other, and it does it in real time. Okay. So as we're connected to people, places, and things, we have that natural connection, right? And then energy and information travels, and it travels really, really kind of without the benefit of time. It happens pretty instantaneously. So we operate a lot like radar, okay? Where we are sending and receiving information all the time. And if you remember that we talked about the heart, for instance, being many times stronger magnetically than the brain, right? And then the heart actually has its own functioning features. It has its own set of neurons that are very similar to the brain. The average person has about 40,000 of these kind of neurons. So your heart really is kind of a second brain. And that was what we're talking about intuition. Intuition is really more about receiving information and how you and feeling it, okay? Than it is, it's not about reasoning it. Reasoning things is not intuition. Reasoning things is just thinking, okay? And a lot of times thinking can get us into trouble, right? That old expression, hey, don't overthink that, right? Because when we reason too hard, what we do is we shut off access to our subconscious and that vast quantity of data that we've either accumulated or that we're receiving. And so so let's do this over the next week. All right, I'm going to do it too. Over the next week, I want you to write down instances where you knew something in advance of its occurrence. Now, here's the thing about it. It doesn't matter whether it's large or small, okay? Things like this, they don't distinguish between large or small. It's all the same because they're not, because like intuition isn't emotionally invested into an event, right? It just gives you the information. It doesn't independently judge it, right? So it doesn't matter whether it's large or small, okay? When you get a chance, when it happens, write it down or, dictate it into your phone or whatever, however you keep track of things. And then you're gonna see that you have a lot more of these than you might think you do. And that's the reason, and that's when we talk about, well, who has intuition? Who can have it? Well, everybody has it, all right? It's just simply a matter of recognizing it. And I think it's one of those things where if you give yourself the proof, don't have somebody like me tell you, you experience it yourself, okay? And all of a sudden, when you get a degree of competency around it and comfort, all right, it changes your life because you have extra information. It's like having an extra set of eyes and ears for every single thing you do. And sometimes it requires a little bit of interpretation, and maybe sometimes it's not 100% accurate because maybe we didn't interpret what we're getting for information correctly. But yet, vastly more often than not, okay, it is accurate. And it's kind of simply a matter of when we hear things like, what judgment do we put on it? We might hear something that is coming, that we should be paying attention to. We might not like it, which happens a lot. Right? We might not like it. We might look at it and say, that can't possibly be true. And that's when you have to move to being the observer. And being the observer is simply don't be in judgment of the information, just take the information in. The key part is take the information in, because forewarned is forearmed, right? Once you have the information, whether you like it or not, you can deal with it, all right? But it's better off having that than being surprised. So I'm just parenthetically put that into this discussion. But once you kind of understand it and you kind of become your own believer, all right, you become your own believer, then you'll be able to use this as a tool to navigate life in small things, medium-sized things and large things. And it's pretty cool. Um, and it's kind of like life at that level is a little bit like a never-ending experiment. It's kind of fun, and you can just keep playing with it and adjusting to it and understanding how these things work. And the more grateful you are about it, the more you get, and more thankful for having these really special tools and resources that we have as a species. So, so let's make that our project. I'm just going to check the chat here. Let's make that the project for this coming week, and I'm going to do it too. And it's going to be I've got a little journal that we're going to do. Yeah, Lucian said, yeah, how do you correlate that gut feeling? Yeah, gut feelings, intuition. There's just something not right about this. And how many times have we said that? I had I really can't talk about it because it's confidential. It's an acquisition we were working on. But you have certain situations, like you can look to Lucian's point, right? You can have a situation that on the surface looks perfectly fine, not a problem, but you still don't feel good about it. And that's that gut feeling. Now, what's influencing that gut feeling? A lot of the information that's flowed through your subconscious and it's showing up in your consciousness, okay? By you feeling just a little upset in your stomach, or you're kind of nervous about something. I had an event this past week. I couldn't sort. I was somewhere in between like nervous and anxious, which I don't usually get that way, and maybe even a little bit excited actually about it. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But what it did tell me though was to pay attention. It did tell me that be very present at this meeting. And so once I kind of got the data, I had this like I said, kind of nervous, excited, energized, type feeling. I was like, oh, okay, I got to be paying attention to this because this isn't going to be just some normal meeting. And sure enough, it really wasn't. It was okay. It ended up okay, but it kind of started off a little dicey. And if I hadn't been more present, I might have been caught off guard and not have been able to recover. So think about it in terms like that. Yeah, Sarah, that's really great. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, you have colorful butterfly feelings versus black butterfly feelings. Yeah, and we're all wired differently. So there's what clues things in for me is going to be entirely different than what might clue things in for Allie or Sarah or Linda or anybody, right? So they're entirely different. What's really important is that you listen to it. It's the listening part. Okay. Again, just one of the reasons why just going for a walk, being in nature, meditation, just sitting in the house, reading a book, right? All these, whatever it is, quiet. It's about quieting the mind because the mind just, we talked about the mind yesterday, last week, right? Is that the brain basically is there so we don't bump into things. It helps us just like navigate, all right? But it's also just does its thing, it's like the inner critic, that everybody has these voices that it just chirps at you all the time, right? And because when the brain's not engaged, it'll just chirp, and most of it's frankly not helpful. And so when you can find time to disconnect from it, right, that's making that, when the chirping shuts off, okay, it's making room for more productive sound to come in to you, right? And so when we talk about being in silence, that's what it is. It allows more space for better information to come in. It comes in through your intuition, right? Okay, so it looks like we're at the end of chat here. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to this, and so we're just like scratching the surface. And we'll do some more work next week on maybe we'll go just a little bit deeper. So, okay, so we have our homework assignment, and I'll share with you a few things that have happened to me during the week, and then we can maybe chat in some if anybody who wants to share next week. So, all right, take care. Have an amazing week.
Thank you.